The Good Reading Podcast is brought to you by Luxury, the monthly book subscription that pairs a new release book with a pampering gift delivered to your door. There are new books every month and 9 genres to choose from. Why not spoil yourself or give the gift of a Luxury subscription today? Visit luxury.com.au to find out how. Vialoux's eyes dropped to the table. He fortified with some wine and then raised the pen. Up front, Paulie was fussing with the register, trying to be unobtrusive, making a stealth job of killing time. Beyond him on 4th Avenue, the nighttime traffic was just floating lights running back and forth, puddles picking up the tint, an electric mural with each passing. He had a broadened view of the window next to him, and on the sidewalk, beyond the weak reflection of the tablecloth and its candle flame, he saw a man in black, face hidden by a ski mask, gloved hands bringing up a shotgun. The barrel swung to tug at Vialoux as Marshall rose from his chair, and as he came upright, he grabbed the table by its edge and flipped it toward the window. The tabletop was vertical as it struck the glass, the pane dropping out as a curtain of white pebbles, and then the shotgun boomed. Quiet after that, splinters and blood exploding through the room in near silence under the ringing in his ears. Marshall crouched and dived and caught Vialoux in a tackle chest high, crashed him backward off his chair and onto the floor. The second shot blew out more glass and wood chips. Paulie was on his stomach beneath another table, hands crushed to his ears like a skull vice. Marshall risked a glance, saw the man with the gun cross the street to a car idling at the far curb, lights off, exhaust misting at its fender. The guy jumped back in and the car took off hard, cutting right onto 4th through a red light. No chance of catching them. No chance of helping Vialoux either. He lay on his back, bleeding from the chest. Eyes open in the distant stare the dead have, looking all the way to heaven. Hello and a very warm welcome to the Good Reading Podcast. Ben Sanders lives in Auckland, New Zealand, and his first 3 works of fiction, The Fallen, By Any Means, and Only the Dead, were all New Zealand fiction bestsellers. American Blood, Ben Sanders' highly anticipated American debut featuring ex-undercover cop Marshall Grade, was followed by Marshall's Law. And today I'm talking to Ben about the 3rd book in the Marshall Grade series, Exit.45. Ben, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ben, how does an Auckland-born and bred author find himself writing hard-boiled crime fiction set in New York City?
Yeah, it was funny actually. I started out my writing career writing novels set, here in New Zealand. But it was recommended to me by my publisher that if I wanted to broaden my audience, maybe it'd be a good idea to set a book overseas. And, since 2015, I've been writing books set in the States. I really enjoy it. And readers seem to be enjoying them as well, which is even better.
Do you have some kind of personal connection or affinity with New York City itself?
No personal connection. I mean, other than the fact that I've always just been fascinated by it as a setting. I've travelled there quite a bit. I've visited a number of times, and it obviously has this real status within the genre as a fantastic setting, and readers of crime and mystery fiction will immediately have those criminal associations. So it always struck me as something that offered rich opportunity for storytelling, and I always love writing about it and visiting, and particularly with this latest book, and with the obvious restrictions associated with COVID, it was nice to write this book and to a certain extent have a little tour of America and New York without leaving home, which was terrific.
And New York is a great place to set a crime fiction story, but why not LA?
Yeah, I've written a number of books now set in the States, and I've moved around a little bit. But and LA as a city is always really interested me as well. But I was rightly or wrongly conscious of the fact that LA has been very well chronicled, possibly even to a greater extent than New York as a crime setting. So there's a little bit of trepidation on my part about writing a novel that's set there entirely. So New York, where I've spent a bit more time, and I'm just a bit more confident about writing something set there that's maybe seen as being a bit different and still carrying on in a really engaging criminal tradition.
You mentioned a moment ago that your publisher encouraged you to write more broadly or outside the settings of New Zealand. Did you have to confront some kind of, I guess, a cultural cringe when it came to writing homegrown New Zealand crime fiction?
Possibly. I mean, I was never really conscious of it. I started writing because I love stories, and it made sense to me initially to write about what as they say. And Auckland, being where I lived, was a place that I was really familiar with, and I wasn't someone who'd had any first-hand experience of crime, so it I certainly felt that I was seeing a different side of Auckland, certainly in my imagination when it came to writing about it. I didn't feel the cultural cringe factor, and didn't sort of get any feedback along those lines either. I think people often said that they actually really enjoyed reading something that was set locally, and they could therefore picture really vividly. But that said, I really enjoy writing about America just because of the novelty, I suppose. It's not somewhere where I live, and so because of that, it seems different and intriguing. And I sit down to write and always have a lot of energy to put something down on paper, just because of that, the remoteness of it, I suppose.
Exit.45 fits into this fairly broad genre, I suppose, of American crime fiction we label hard-boiled. Does that term have any meaning for you? And what makes a story, or a character for that matter, hard-boiled anyway?
Oh, that's a great question. When readers encounter one of my books, they know that they're going to come up against, the sorts of characters who don't necessarily follow the formal rules and are more beholden to their own code than anyone else, and aren't afraid to use force where necessary. So whatever the definition of hard-boiled may be, I think the stories that I'm writing can stake some sort of claim to be operating under that broad tent.
And we can't talk about American crime fiction without using the term noir either, especially LA noir. But you're writing about people and the city of New York. Is noir part of your New York creative thinking?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, most obviously in the visual sense, noir, meaning dark. I mean, a lot of the story is, set during nighttime, and my writing process is very visual. I mean, I'm seeing a story in my head and describing it rather than writing something down in order to visualize it. And frankly, the images that came to me for this story are the sort of classic rainy, grey sort of New York imagery, either grey and gritty if it wasn't, full on nighttime. So in that visual sense, it certainly felt noirish, as well in terms of the genre aspects that we associate with noir. I think I've hit a few of those markers as well. I mean, a lot of it's influenced by who I like to read. I loved James Ellroy. He obviously casts a huge shadow in this genre, and funnily enough, I'm just reading Lawrence Block's Matthew Scudder series at the moment. Fantastic private investigator series set in New York, and all of those types of books and those sorts of authors that have all sort of come together and really inspired the kind of story that I love to write. So I'm not sure whether I'm ever going to be able to separate myself from those influences. They made such a huge impression on me as a reader, and really drive what I'd like to sit down and put on paper.
Being an outsider to this tradition, and it's a long-established tradition too, this American crime fiction, it must come with some challenges. Is being a New Zealander an advantage or a disadvantage in setting crime fiction in the city of New York?
Well, I suppose it's a little bit of both. I mean, I like to see it as an advantage. I mean, clearly the fact that I'm not there day to day has its challenges, but the way I've always thought about it is that as an outsider, I'm attuned to things that possibly someone who's there day to day isn't necessarily noticing. I love to travel to the States. I've been to New York. Before COVID, I was in the habit of going there every year. And just by virtue of a place being unfamiliar and new, everything becomes interesting. Details that someone who's living there all the time. They might just become background information and mundane, but to the writer who knows that when he gets back from his trip, he needs to sit down and write a book. I'm alert to everything. I see that as a definite advantage. Hopefully it comes through in the fiction.
Exit.45 is the third in the Marshall Grade series, following American Blood and Marshall's Law. Where did this character come from, Marshall Grade, and where's he going, for that matter?
I wanted to write a character in that, great tradition of, I suppose, Western heroes combined with, the elements of the noir genre that we were talking about before. Very self-sufficient and whatever rules they're beholden to are self-established, and really it was that kind of storytelling philosophy that Marshall evolved out of. I always loved those characters like James Bond and Jack Reacher being another obvious example, and Matthew Scudder, who I mentioned just a moment ago, and I loved that style of storytelling, and wanted to have a character that sort of fulfilled those tropes to a great extent. The first novel featuring Marshall was set in New Mexico, and I'd sort of envisioned it as a series that would maybe just be set there, but having travelled more around America and seen the potential for other settings like New York, I've actually, for the last 2 books, I've set him there. So in terms of where he's going geographically, I'm at this stage, I don't know whether I'll take him back to the desert or I'll establish him as more of an urban figure, if you like. But the nice thing is that he's got some options. He could go back to New Mexico, but he's also sort of building up this nice, I think, fictional infrastructure among the criminal element in New York that I can draw on for future books. So yeah, to be honest, at this stage, I'm not quite sure where he's heading.
He's certainly got plenty of dodgy characters, I guess, and
that's right.
Yeah, usual situations to draw from.
He's got opportunities such as they are.
I look forward to seeing and hearing more about those. Your first Marshall Grade book, American Blood, has been optioned for film, and American crime fiction is often catapulted into the spotlight through adaptations for the screen. Do the form and the bands of a screenplay enter into your creative process?
I think, like most authors, I love the idea of my writing being adapted for screen, but really for me, books are the real passion, and the book is the reason that I sit down to write. But I think just by nature of my creative process, that the fact that a story comes to me very visually makes it very suitable for film. I think when you look at how my stories are told, the plot and the story really hinges on dialogue and action, which really is how films are driven. You can't rely on interiority in the same way that you can with fiction. To that extent, I like to think that my books are well suited to a jump to the screen. So I keep my fingers crossed that at some stage they'll make the transition.
Final question to you. Is a Bachelor of Civil Engineering useful in writing crime fiction?
Well, I'm not sure. I think I'm yet to find any obvious utility for it. Maybe it helps me in my creative process in ways that I'm not aware of. But certainly when people ask me, what use is creative writing to engineering and vice versa, I certainly think of them as being pretty well divided. But it's been the way my life is arranged for the last 6 years now. Half the week I'm a structural engineer. Well, Monday, Tuesday I'm a structural engineer, and the rest of the week I'm a crime writer. And I love that diversity, and I like that division, and it works well. And but as far as cross pollination goes, I'm not quite sure whether anything's happening there.
It really sounds like a wonderful way to live, Ben. So I want to thank you for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
I've been talking to Ben Sanders about his latest book in the Marshall Grade series, Exit.45. It's published by Allen & Unwin and is available at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. This Good Reading podcast was brought to you by Luxury. Why not spoil yourself or give the gift of a Luxury subscription today? Visit luxury.com.au to find out how.